likely to be the most likely to support violence if they are men. And if you are 50 and above, you are the least likely to support violence. In part, this of course has to do with the perception that the last time there was violence, it was very, very painful and highly ineffective for Palestinians. The 50 and above remember that, but the 18 to 22s, these are the youngest of the youth, tend to not have a memory of that. So that's why the age makes a difference.
Yes, please.
The Palestinian society is, or the environment is still non-democratic, if you accept this definition.
Yes.
How the media and the mosque and all the structure affect your resolution force?
Well, most Palestinians do not rely on Palestinian media for their information. It is of course possible that the media, the Palestinian media, plays a role. If we look today at which satellite TV outlets are the most effective, it is Al Jazeera, #1. There is some local, like Man News, which is a local civil society kind of organization, media organization. It's not part of the government. The Palestinian TV, for example, is watched by just about 10% or so of the public. However, most people do not rely on print media or TV for information. Instead, they rely on social media. And if you are looking at the youth in particular, reliance on social media is by 90%. So 90% of the 18 to 22 tell us that their main source of information is not TV or print media or radio, but social media. And so social media has all kinds of media, and in general, it is the most poisonous, in terms of Israeli-Palestinian relations, the most poisonous outlet for expression of that would be social media. So part of the explanation, again, for the why, in addition to lack of experience with the violence, for why the 18 to 22 are the most likely to support it, is the reliance on media that is most poisonous.
Yes, please.
Yes, I have a question about Arab perception regarding Jerusalem. Do your polls imply, and if not, I'd like to ask another question, do they imply that the people answering the polls would not be willing to have Jerusalem as their capital side by side with Israel having Jerusalem as their capital as well?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely.
No.
Absolutely not, meaning?
Meaning they do support that. If you have a two-state solution in which the Palestinians have East Jerusalem as a capital, then for the Palestinians, Israel will have its capital in West Jerusalem.
Ah, okay. So what is so terrible about the announcement that so distressed everyone when essentially that's what the announcement was about?
Two things. That's my speculation. One is that this is coming from the U.S. administration that has been attempting to put together a peace plan. Okay. If the Americans, before they declare their peace plan, are already preempting negotiations over Jerusalem. Now, of course, you can say, but they said not borders and whatnot. Most people do not yet see the gray side of the story. They focus on this issue as being a zero-sum issue. What you give to the Israelis, you take from the Palestinians. What is good for Israel must be bad for Palestinians. It is true that at least 2/3 or more Palestinians and Israeli Jews believe this conflict is a zero-sum conflict. If one side gets something, then it comes at the expense of the other side. So there is that part, But then there is a second part, which for the Palestinians, this is Jerusalem reflects on the trend that this administration, there were certain expectations that this administration will be pro-Israel, will be pro-Likud, and would go far in appeasing the right wing in the US and in Israel. And that this is an indication of where things are heading. So this is about preempting negotiations, giving the Israelis something while denying the Palestinians something else.
What were they denying? This is what I'm trying to understand.
Well,
what did they perceive they were denying?
The state of Israel defines its borders to include East Jerusalem. You know, when Israel made the annexation decision and expanded the borders and made a decision to have Jerusalem as its capital with the expanded city of Jerusalem, this was done in 1980. You know what happened as a result of that? 13 embassies that were in Jerusalem were relocated to Tel Aviv at that time. So all those embassies that were in Jerusalem, once Israel announced that its Jerusalem is no longer restricted to West Jerusalem, decided that, well, now our presence could be interpreted to mean that we approve of the Israeli new boundaries of the city, which would then be prejudging an issue that was contested. So that is the part that they are disagreeing with.
Yes, please.
Yes, follow-up questions. I wondered what is the perception now of one state versus two-state solution as a consequence of that particular statement by Trump?
We didn't find any change. I didn't mention it in my presentation because there was no change. This was not one of those areas that have seen any change 3 months compared to where we were 3 months ago. 3 months ago, we had about 1/3 of the Palestinians who said they supported a one-state solution, where Jews and Palestinians would have equal rights. Israeli Jews and Palestinians would have equal rights. And this is what we find right now. There has been no change with regard to this particular issue. And I must add that, like previous cases, when we look at the one-state solution, we look at two things. What is the total number of people who support it? And among those, how many also support a two-state solution? On these two dimensions of the one-state solution, there is no change. So 1/3 still supports it, and 2/3 of the 1/3 also support a two-state solution.
You want to follow up or no?
I want to get away from the statistics, and if you will allow me to go to the very basics of the problem. Your references to occupation and Jerusalem imply that you, the Palestinian Arab people, have the right to the land and not the Jews. On what do you base this claim?
Why do you say that? I just said a two-state solution, so Jews have as much rights as Palestinians. East Jerusalem and West Jerusalem for Jews, East Jerusalem for Palestinians. It seems like there is an equality and balance in the position of the Palestinians, not what you just understood.
Now, on what do you base the claim? For instance, there are more than 600 references to Jerusalem in the Bible, none at all, as you know, in the Quran.
But I deal with
you
public
have no,
opinion,
you can,
not with
no,
facts.
this is a fact. I'm just putting two facts and I'm asking you a question. I can tell you that you know that in history, there is a Jewish history, there were kings here and prophets and leaders of Jews, and there is no evidence, nobody has yet been able to tell me any evidence of a Palestinian presence here.
Walter, he is a political scientist, and he deals with the facts and with what happens today, tries to give us data about Palestinian public opinion. You want to
I
bring us...
understand that.
No, but you want to take us
You're
away?
asking one
Yes.
question.
Huh?
You're asking a different question, Walter.
What we try to assess is the extent to which people are willing to agree to a solution that would be within the realm of a two-state solution. A two-state solution means that regardless of what you think about what happened 3,000 years or 2,000 years or so on, you still think that the narrative of the other side is worth listening to, that you are willing to concede to the other side at least a certain part of its narrative. The Palestinians do not say there should be no state of Israel. They say there should be two states, state of Israel and the state of Palestine.
Jewish state?
There is a change with regard to whether it's Jewish or not Jewish. Palestinians have a hard time conceiving of a state that is Jewish. They concede a state of Israel. It can define itself in any way it wants. But for them, a Jewish state might precludes the rights of Israeli Arabs. So this is problematic for them to digest the notion that the state of Israel is defined in terms of its Jewish character because of the concern about the rights of the minorities in that state.
Yes, please.
I understand this is a very complicated issue, but I heard that the Palestinians in East Jerusalem, quite many of them trying to get the citizenship in Israel, and if the support for the Abbas is so low, so actually quite some Palestinian East Jerusalem might be happy about the entire Jerusalem to be Israeli.
You might be absolutely right. The problem is not actually Abbas. When an Jerusalemites, the state of Israel is not granting them citizenship. The state of Israel doesn't want them. That's the truth. If Israel wanted Israeli Arabs, if Israel wanted East Jerusalemites to become Israeli citizens, it would probably have by now, half of them Israeli citizens. But Israel makes it extremely difficult for Palestinians who live in Jerusalem to have citizenship in Israel. If Israel basically says to everyone in East Jerusalem, you are Israeli citizens, automatically entitled to citizenship, there would be a huge increase in number of East Jerusalemites who would have a passport, an Israeli passport. Now, does that mean that in that case they would rather have East Jerusalem under Israeli sovereignty rather than Palestinian sovereignty? Absolutely not. 70%, based on our surveys, 70% of East Jerusalemites want East Jerusalem to come under Palestinian sovereignty. There's about a quarter or so who say they don't mind living under Israeli sovereignty.
Because of Hadassah.
Well, there is a lot of questioning. I mean, there is a lot of Palestinians who question the viability of a two-state solution. And East Jerusalemites are no different. They basically say, what, are we going to wait forever for a state to emerge and for us to have citizenship in a state of our own? And so in the meanwhile, they are willing to accept citizenship. If Israel is to make it easy for them to get it, they will get it. But it doesn't change their perception. They are not like Israeli Arabs. Israeli Arabs today tell us in the surveys that if a Palestinian state is created, they definitely don't want to be part of it. They want to remain part of the state of Israel. Not in East Jerusalem. In East Jerusalem, we still have 70%, at least 70% who say we want to become part of the Palestinian state, not part of the state of Israel.
Guys, we'll take a quick round of brief questions. No statements. Yes, please.
In view of the findings about the popularity of states like Egypt, Jordan, and who are the Palestinians are looking up to as a sort of savior right now? Is the popularity of Iran going up or?
Unfortunately, we didn't ask about Iran in the survey. This was one of our mistakes. We should have, because there's no doubt that the American statement is creating a realignment in terms of where there is at least a questioning among Palestinians whether the current alignment Palestinians have, where Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Jordan are the friends of the Palestinians, or whether they should be looking up to Turkey and Iran or somebody else. We have not asked about that as an alternative. We wanted to examine whether the existing allies are still there, but we didn't ask about that. My guess is there probably is today greater appreciation of the role of Iran and Turkey in particular, but I don't have the evidence for that.
Yes, please.
Just some, to go straight to your polling expertise, is there any indication of Palestinian thoughts about alternatives to the two-state solution, to two countries in one homeland or federation suggestions?
There is thinking about those ideas, but nothing in terms of support comes even close to support for the idea of a two-state solution.
Of the traditional Israel here, Palestine there.
Two sovereigns. Now, we find that there is flexibility among some of the public. About a third, for example, would support a one-state solution, and 2/3 of those, so we're talking about a quarter, basically, who is flexible. So 2 states is fine, 1 state is fine. We have a similar percentage, maybe slightly more, who are also flexible about a confederation. 2 states is fine, but a confederation is also fine. But again, just a quarter, maybe slightly more than a quarter. However, we were talking earlier about this, the idea of 2 sovereign states, but Israeli Jews and Palestinian Arabs can live as permanent citizens, or residents in the other state. That we found in our most recent survey, 40% supporting the idea that Jews can live in a Palestinian state on permanent basis, as permanent residents, as long as they are law-abiding. 40% of the Palestinians say. I'm talking about our most recent survey. Just public opinion.
And then
40%.
40% say permanent residents, Jews allowed as long as Palestinians allowed in Israel.
And then my follow-up question is, when you talk amongst Palestinians about sovereignty,
Yes.
Or a Palestinian state of sovereignty, do you poll what sort of political entity Palestinians envision? Do they envision an Israeli-style democracy, a monarchy like Jordan? Like what do they have? What do Palestinians have in mind when you use those phrases?
Okay, there are 2 sides to it. One is what they want and what they expect. What they want is a democracy. There's absolutely no doubt about it. A democracy is what most Palestinians prefer, that their future state be. However, if we ask them whether the Palestinian state will be democratic, 2/3 say no, it will not be democratic. Now, in fact, we find a strong relationship between this expectation and the level of support for the 2-state solution. In other words, if we ask people today, do you support the 2-state solution? We get a certain percent. Let's say our most recent survey showed 46% in favor of a 2-state solution. It's still the largest, but not a majority. Now, if we said, this future Palestinian state will be democratic, you know what happened to the 46%? It shots up to almost 2/3. If we said, do you support a 2-state solution whereby the Palestinian state of the future will be a democratic state, then support for the 2-state solution goes up considerably.
But you're promising something they know they're not going to get.
Yes, they're not expecting it.
Yeah.
But if they are given assurances that it will be that, then this changes their mind.
Last one?
Can I raise,
Okay,
Very short, very short.
okay.
can I raise
Okay.
the elephant in the room?
Yes.
Did you ask anybody about the idea of Israeli access to Jewish holy sites?
Yes. You mean for visits?
For visits, what, from
Control,
whichever aspect you
prayer,
wish. Whatever aspect you choose.
Okay, then it depends. We asked, not in this survey, by the way, but in previous surveys, we asked about Jewish holy places, and that doesn't mean Al-Aqsa Mosque. It means other Jewish places. And we asked Palestinians whether, when there is a two-state solution, Jews would be able to visit. And the answer is yes. A majority would say yes. Jews can visit and pray in Jewish holy places.
And the Temple Mount is not a Jewish holy place.
The Wailing Wall or the Western Wall are according to our survey, would come under Israeli sovereignty. It would not be part of the Palestinian state.
Temple Mount.
Not the top of the plateau. The top of the plateau.
He's talking to a Palestinian, I forgot to tell you.
Al-Haram al-Sharif, Jews can visit but not pray.
1 second.
Yes. If 40% support the idea of permanent residency for Jews in the Palestinian state, does that put an end to the settlement issue?
Good question. We didn't use the term settlers referring to Israelis, so I would imagine it might be different, but I can't, yeah. Look, when we, in the past, this was not asked in our most recent survey, but in the past we did ask whether settlers would be able to stay in the settlements where they are now as part of a peace agreement. A majority said no. Higher majority than what we currently have. But if I go back 10, 15 years ago, in fact, a majority said yes. So over the years, the positions regarding settlers have hardened.
Okay, there seems to be a slight contradiction then. I mean, like those Israelis who are living there won't get to live there, but other Israelis won't go there.
But keep in mind that most Palestinians would say settlements are built on illegal Palestinian land, confiscated land. So this would be different than an Israeli who is coming to rent an apartment or to live in an area where there is no debate and discussion about whether this is legal or illegal.
Maybe that's a way to solve the problem. Change the name settlers to something else.
Well, some would do that.
Walter,
Okay.
last one, but a question.
Okay.
A question?
Social statistics are determined, influenced by education. I think you would agree with that.
I don't know what social statistics
Your
is.
statistics of what people think.
Perceptions
What
of
people think.
Yeah.
Agree with him.
By education. And now I want to ask you about my favorite subject. Why is the education of Palestinian youth not adjusted to peace?
You're not asking me about a survey finding, but I will try to give
Well,
you
it
an
affects,
Do
education affects.
Do your findings support whatever it says?
Actually, most Palestinians believe that their education is just fine. It does not have incitement. But Israeli education is the one that is full of incitement.
I don't speak Hebrew good enough. I can't judge that.
But I'm just giving you the perception. Most of the Palestinians do not agree with the Israeli position that the Palestinian educational system incites against peace or in favor of violence. Most reject that accusation. Instead, most Palestinians believe that it's the Israeli educational system that teaches Israeli kids hatred of Arabs and so on. In fact, when we say to Palestinians, if a two-state solution agreement is reached, and Israel agreed as part of this two-state solution to change its curriculum so that it would no longer incite against Palestinians, would you support a two-state solution? We find a significant increase, just as when we say the future state of Palestine will be democratic, we find a significant increase in favor of a two-state solution if the Israeli side does not educate Israelis on hatred. So the story about education and the role of education is seen differently from where you sit. If you sit in Ramallah, you see the problem on the other side. Obviously, if you sit in Tel Aviv or in Jerusalem, West Jerusalem, you see it differently.
And also one society is democratic and the other one is not democratic.
The society is democratic,
No,
it's the political system that
the
is not.
system of education has different standards also.
Most Palestinians accept democratic values, just like most Israelis. So the society itself is not the problem. On the Palestinian side, the problem is with their political system, not with the society.
Okay, Dr. Shikaki, thank you for a fascinating presentation and handling the Q&A. I think it's important to hear what Palestinians are thinking, and always with your analysis, it's more interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.